gentlemen, dear friends of the Hans Seidel Foundation, welcome to our event today. I warmly welcome our top-class speakers this evening. Labour Party leader, Knesset MP Merav Michaeli, the chairwoman of the Frauenunion Bayern, my regional chairwoman, Landtag MP and former Minister Ulrike Schaaf, the Knesset MP Sharon Haskell, as well as my former colleague from the German Bundestag, Member of European Parliament, Marlene Mottler. I am very pleased that we can have this European-Israeli dialogue tonight and that we can focus on the absolute majority of the people in our countries. More than 50% of the population, both in Israel and in Europe, are women. Even if women are often very well qualified and have the best school and university degrees, women are still underrepresented in parliaments and boardrooms. One of the goals of the Hans Seidel Foundation is to increase the democratic participation of women worldwide. I would like to thank our co-hosts this evening, the Europe-Israel Network, represented by Harriet Gimpel and Raanan Elias, and my colleague, Dr. Markus Dehm, Director of the Hans Seidel Foundation Brussels office, and his team, Mrs. Schley, for the great cooperation. Now I can hand over to the moderator of this evening, Miri Michaeli. She's an Israeli TV journalist who also reported as a Europe correspondent in the past. Dear Miri, I'm looking forward to an interesting evening.
Thank you so much. Can't wait to see you in person. Thank you, Julia. And good evening from our studio in Tel Aviv. I'm delighted to join this extremely important discussion. The topic is very, very dear to me, and I know to all of us here. I wish to thank the host of this event, Ms. Julia Obermeyer, Israel representative of the Hans Seidel Foundation, which held programs I was fortunate to attend as a young journalist, and the Europe-Israel Network and its founder, Raanan Elias, founder and the former CEO of ELNET, the European Leadership Network. With me in the studio today, Ms. Harriet Gimpel, founding member at Europe-Israel Network. Good evening to you, Harriet.
Good evening.
How are you this evening?
Fine, thank you. And it's nice to see everybody joining us here. It's an honor to be representing the Europe-Israel Network. I think it is noteworthy that when Raanan Elias chose to establish or proposed establishing this organization, this conference, Women Coping with the Pandemic, was already on his agenda. I hope that men throughout Europe and Israel will always join women in promoting the status of women.
Oh, amen to that. Now we will turn to our first interview with the member of Knesset, Merav Michaeli, head of the Labour Party in Israel, and the only woman currently at the head of a political party in Israel, which I must say, a somewhat unfortunate distinction. So I want to ask you, how will you address the most common everyday issues and challenges facing women?
So how are women in Israel going through the pandemic? Oh my God, not well at all, I would say. 70% of the huge number of unemployed during the pandemic, 70% of them are women. Gives a strong feeling that the Prime Minister just sent women back to the kitchen. It's really overwhelming, the fact that women are so badly taken back by the excuse of the pandemic, and even women whose life were already much more egalitarian on a daily basis found themselves going back to being almost solely in charge over child bringing and household work, etc. In a crisis, find themselves less available to protect women and women's personal security. So to me, we will be able that we have come out of the pandemic only after we've gotten women back to a better place than where they went or we were when the pandemic started.
I talk about it a lot on my Instagram page. I called all my followers to vote only, I don't care what party this is, but to vote only for the politician that will promise to do something finally in this country about domestic abuse that is in rise, not only in Israel, but I think globally. You were the first one to come up and say something about it. Is there anything that the government can do, in your opinion, to change this unfortunate situation?
There's so much that governments not only can do, but should do. And this is also already something that after so many years of a feminist fight for recognition in violence against women, and so many years of research and so many years of activism that I have had the privilege of leading a big part of, there is so much knowledge. Not only is there knowledge, but there's knowledge that the Israeli government, after many years of, as I said, fight against it, managed to turn into a program in order to prevent this violence and prevent women from losing their lives over this.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, it's been 4 years that there's already a program that was prepared by ministries in the government itself, but it has not been implemented.
It seems like it's not only this government. For about 70 years, nothing really happened regarding to domestic abuse, and it's just in the rise, I think, more than ever now with the quarantine. And I think one of the reasons that nothing was done here in Israel is that we don't have many women in politics here in Israel, unfortunately. Why aren't there enough women in politics in Israel?
The number one reason is that the gender gaps in Israel are still very, very wide. If in comparison to Europe, I think in every measurement, you will see that the gender gap in Israel is, the wage gap is bigger, the representation in politics is smaller, the religious forces that are fighting against pluralism, against equality, for taking women backwards into traditional positions are much stronger here, and they have a lot of political power, unfortunately. And the thing is also that one needs to recognize that the political sphere in Israel is extremely about power. And we as women are brought up to not want power, to not use power. A woman with power or with ambition for power is considered not feminine. Women have, as I said, much less money and much less support from their surrounding to go out and fight for things that you believe in or achieve a higher place in the hierarchy. And so, yes, we are still very much behind. We've been stuck with about a quarter of the members in parliament. So the first ever list to run to the Knesset that has an equality between men and women is the one of Labor under me, thankfully. This is something that I was so excited to do. It's been something that I've been dreaming of. And the fact that I got to the place where I can actually do it was really sheer joy for me.
I know that in Europe, it is very common to have a ministry for women's affairs. What about Israel?
The way I see feminism and gender issues is the same way that I see the environment. To me, I think we need to have an environment consultant and a gender consultant in every ministry. Really, every sphere of life has to do with gender. So the same way we have a legal consultant or a legal department, moreover, in every ministry, exactly the same way we should have a gender division in every ministry as much as an environmental division in every ministry.
And one last question, since we're here with Europe, with Germany, and here from Tel Aviv, what message do you wish to deliver to Europeans?
The European Union, which is an inspiring project, truly an inspiring project of peace and prosperous, a genuine huge achievement of humanity on European soil, is an important partner for Israel. We are speaking in a day where the International Court in The Hague decided a very, very problematic to investigate Israel on things that actually they do not have the authority to investigate Israel on, and that will not lead to further chances to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, something that I know that EU is a strong partner for and sees the importance of it. It's something that will be achieved only in a negotiation and only with goodwill of the sides involved. I also want to make sure that all the Israeli interests of its security are being considered. That is the ballistic missiles, that is the financing of terror, both in Lebanon and in Gaza, and of course the Iranian militias in Syria. So I hope we can work on all this as well as the extent commerce that we have in common. And I hope we can reach many, many good things for all of us sooner than later, and hopefully with a much improved government.
Mirat Micheli, thank you so much. You're welcome to stay with us for a short video produced specially for this event.
The corona pandemic. It is hitting people in almost all countries and continents with full force. And yet, it is often affecting one population group more than others. Women. In Germany, domestic violence against women continues to increase during the pandemic. Women also have to do housework and care work more often again. 69% of them say that they do the housework, compared to just 11% of men. Because of this double burden, women more often lose their jobs or work less. Almost every second woman feels pushed to her limits in the crisis. Physically, psychologically, emotionally. Among men, it is only just under 1 in 3. So does the virus exacerbate existing inequalities between men and women? Does it even lead to a roll backwards, back to the old distribution of roles?
The impact of the corona pandemic on women in all walks of life through the lens of Europeans and Israelis. What can the two learn from one another, and what legislation and actions are still missing and can make a difference for the better in the near future? This is our topic. MP Ulrike Schaub is a member of the Bavarian State Parliament and head of the CSU Women's Union in Bayern from 2014 until 2018. She served as a Bavarian State Minister of the Environment and Consumer Protection. My first question is to you, Ulrike Schaub. As the head of the CSU Women's Union, if you had the option to run any legislation, what would that be?
That's a difficult question, but first of all, hello to everyone. A very warm welcome from my side. I'm saying hello here from the Bavarian Parliament in Munich, and I'm really happy to take part in this interesting event today. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. So your question, which legislation I would be part in, I would say it's very good to be in here now, because it's such a interesting time, such an exciting time. And we're not at our goal. Our goal must be 50-50% women and men in each, in science, in politics, in modern economy, in just everywhere. And I think it's a really good time now to work with this on this goal and to get forward. There is going on something, but it's not that the issue that we have to get, the goal that we have to get. So it's a good time to work now and to be really strong and powerful in all women's matters.
Thank you so much for this. Member of European Parliament, Marlene Mortler, is a German politician from the Christian Social Union in Bavaria, the CSU, who has been a member of the European Parliament since 2019. She was a member of the German Parliament from 2002 until 2019. Marlene also served as a commissioner on narcotic drugs at the Federal Ministry of Health in the government of Chancellor Angela Merkel from 2014 until 2019. Good evening to you. And I want to ask you, Marlena, in light of the video that we just saw, what can the state do to minimize or stop further deterioration as a result of the COVID pandemic?
We basically used the same examples as the colleagues from Israel described. However, many years ago, even decades ago, we took precautions in Germany at the federal, state, and local levels. And at that time, we created women's shelters. For example, we have an emergency number for women in my district. It is available 24 hours a day. That said, women in crisis can contact that number anytime they have problems related to COVID. But there's also a time after COVID. That's one thing. Otherwise, we do the following in the district, in our municipality. We regularly invite the Equal Opportunities Commissioner. We regularly invite the head of our women's shelter. They have to report to us regularly. Has there been progress? Are there setbacks? What are the reasons for it? Why do women come, and why do they so often go back to husbands? And I say this now quite deliberately. Also the women in our council, they have to listen to these reports and do encourage and support them. And I'm fully committed to this.
This is very, very, very important. It always amazes me to see how these issues are, it's the same story in Israel, in Germany, everywhere else in the world. And MK Sharen Haskel, member of the Israeli parliament, contender on behalf of the New Hope Party. Sharen is considered one of the most active members of the Knesset in promoting legislation for personal freedom and free markets, and is involved in the promotion of cannabis legislation in 2016. She was recognized by the Jewish Journal as a leader of the new generation of women in politics. I think this pandemic is reversing gender equality in the workplace. What can we do? Is there a thing that we can do, all of us, and politicians especially?
All right, so I was just answering before, the first step for all of us as women, we're all raising young men as well. And the education part is extremely important in that. During the campaign, my amazing husband is the one that is staying at home with a newly born baby as well. And it's important that more and more men take up on themselves also this role in the family as well, and accept it as a normal thing. And it starts with our education of our children. I think that as parliamentarians, as legislators, there's a lot of things that we can do. We've seen in this pandemic, especially here in Israel, that 70% of the unemployed force are women.
Wow.
Israel had some of the most amount of days that our school system were closed. It means that it's not just the woman that's doing the housework, she's the one that's doing the teaching as well, the cooking, everything. And so they have to give up a lot of their work and position and jobs. And in that way, I think as legislator, there's a few legislation that at least we at New Hope now committed in our campaign as well. So one of them, for example, is the recognition of expenses for small business owners, women, and independents, freelancers, women who work. And this is a recognition of expenses for example, kids' kindergartens and kids' care when they need to pay for someone to look after the kids so they can go out into the working force. It needs to be, there need to be a tax return on these expenses as well. This is part of their work, and that will motivate them as well to go out into the working force.
So Ilama Media Center is a nonprofit NGO based in Nazareth. It was founded in 2000 by a group of Arab Israeli journalists and academics active in the fields of civil society, media, and research.
العنف ضد المرأة هو ظاهرة عابرة للحدود. منظمة الصحة العالمية أظهرت في 2019 أن ثلث نساء العالم تعرضوا للعنف خلال حياتهم. العنف ضد المرأة هو نتاج مجتمع بيكون حدوي اللي بحط صورة نمطية معينة للمرأة، بحدد مسار حياتها. الخروج عن هاي الصورة بعرضها للعقاب بصل لمرحلة القتل. على متخذي السياسات والقرارات في مهمة لمناهضة العنف، لكن المهم الأهم والدور الأهم ملقى علينا كإعلاميين وصحفيين. في إعلام أجرينا بحث طريقة تغطية الإعلام العربي المحلي في إسرائيل لقضايا قتل النساء عام 2018 2019 2020. بكافة الحالات أظهرت نفس النتائج. ب 66% من الحالات اللي تم رصدها تحليلها كان في غياب تام لأنسنة الضحية، مجرد رقم كانت ما إلها قصة شخصية. 73% من العينة كان في عدم شجب واستنكار، ما في إدانة لعملية القتل كأنه مسموح القتل. 33% من حالات العينة تم التطرق إلى قصة العيلة، تم مقابلة العيلة، ما عدا ذلك العيلة مش موجودة بالصورة. فقط ب 13% من العينة اللي فحصناها كان في تغطية شاملة عميقة تتناول المحور بطريقة اللي تهدف لردع الجريمة. برأيي حالياً أجى دورنا كإعلاميين نحاول نوقف العنف ضد النساء. النتائج صارت مقلقة أكثر وسنوياً في ازدياد لحالات القتل.
I have to say this is personally my life mission as a journalist and I think as a woman.
We have to see reality and realize that many women are in jobs or often choose jobs that pay less in the first place. Very often these are social professions, professions that do not have this status in public. I think as long as we have that gender pay gap, which means that women have to work longer compared to men, we have a gender pay day on March 11 here in Germany. That means women have to work through all of 2020 until March 11 in order to reach the same salary, the same wages as men. Something is wrong. And therefore it's important that we women become more enthusiastic for other professions, for the so-called MINT subjects, for technical professions that offer future prospects, that women should not be satisfied with what they have, that they should trust themselves more and strive to what they really want to achieve. One thing, of course, is very important: equal pay for same qualifications. Well, basically, that's so obvious, but that's exactly the point I've made in the beginning. Despite the same qualifications, there's no equal pay. It's a positive example. May I add something? I want to underline everything that Marlene said. We women have to trust in ourselves more. It's really astonishing that when we look at women's qualifications, whether it's the school certificate or university degree, women have good grades or better results than men. That means the qualification is there. It's just a matter of self-confidence in negotiations, that when it comes to money, to salary negotiations, women have to demand as much as men. But let me add something else, especially when it comes to families and marriages, who owns more, who goes to work. Usually women are the ones who with lower income and they stay at home. And I believe that that we have to change our tax system. I don't know the Israeli tax system, but we in Germany have a tax system that is based on the income of married couples, of families. Men and women simply earn differently, but they're assessed jointly. And this results in a higher tax burden for the person who earns less. In my opinion, this is no longer sustainable. If we want more working women, and especially in business where there's diversity, the enterprises are more successful, there actually is no longer any reason why we should be satisfied with lower pay. Also from the point of view of the family income of spouses who then pay taxes together. So I think we have to get to the tax system too.
Thank you, Harriet.
Very same position in government ministries. Often a woman is offered 40% less than a man. Sometimes it also is evident in various benefits like a car allowance. And I'm wondering, Sharon, if you could address that, what can be done in Israel to close the gaps in government ministries?
The law is that everybody have to be offered the same amount of money, whether it is a man or a female. And if we do find a difference between those salaries, then the woman can actually prosecute the ministry or her workplace and actually get the benefits from the employer, even going backwards. And I think that more women should use it and actually go to court and demand that. And I think that the more enforcement we have in it, the more deterioration we will create from employers to actually make a difference between the salaries as well.
I would like to tie this to elections, to political participation, because it is so important to have more women in parliament, including local parliaments, our views, our experiences. A woman's point of view on political decisions matter. And when I look at our national parliament, the German Bundestag, at the moment we have a commission that is working on how elections in the future will be conducted, and also on parity in the German Bundestag. And I think that this is the crucial thing now, that women sit on this commission to see where things start. With us, we come from the party, from the very bottom, from the lowest level, and we had to establish ourselves in order to get the chance to run for office, and then, of course, to be elected. But that's where it begins. It starts in the party, and that's why I was happy to hear that the head of your party, that she already has such a list comprised of men, woman. Parity must come as a rule. However, it will have to be conformed with our constitution. Legally, it's not that easy. But we have to get to the point where more women simply gain the same opportunities from candidacy to election. And if I go back to economy, before the pandemic, we had an endless discussion about skilled workers, people who are well qualified to exercise certain professions. During the pandemic, that discussion has died down a bit, but the topic will come up again after the pandemic. We are in need of qualified specialists, and economy cannot do without women at all. It does not make sense economically not to use capacities, knowledges, and skills of women. That is why I think, or I hope, that parity will be implemented much faster in business than in politics.
Thank you. Now I want to show you another video by Elam about the way the media relates to women in general and Arab women specifically, leaving perhaps room for optimism as things are changing for the better, hopefully.
3 2 1 يلا.
نتابع النشرة وإلى ملف كورونا، حيث قرر الأطباء في مستشفى رمبم بمدينة حيفا
فادي بالمستشفى طبيبات وأطباء، لهيك بيقولوا طاقم طبي لو سمحت.
قرر الطاقم الطبي وبالتعاون مع إدارة المستشفى إلزام الطاقم بعدم السفر والتصرف وفق قوانين الطوارئ للتعامل مع جائحة كورونا. وفي الجنايات قدمت النيابة العامة في محكمة الصلح في مدينة الناصرة لائحة اتهام ضد شاب من إحدى قرى الشمال بتهمة التعرض لإحدى الفتيات.
فادي هذا تحرش، هذا مش اعتداء ومش تعرض.
وفي الجنايات قدمت النيابة العامة في محكمة الصلح بمدينة الناصرة لائحة اتهام ضد شاب من إحدى قرى الشمال بتهمة التحرش بإحدى فتيات القرية وإجبارها على إقامة علاقة غرامية معه بالقوة.
لا، شو هاي علاقة غرامية بالقوة؟ اسمه اعتداء جنسي. إحنا مجموعة من الصحفيات أسسنا حراك ضد العنف وحضرنا دليل للتعامل مع قضايا العنف. استعملوه.
I would like to say a word about this video, but first, Harriet will ask Marlena a question.
Well, I would like to ask, following up on the previous question before the video, in a similar spirit regarding the use of language in the public discourse. I think this video clip also pointed out how nuances of words affect the way we interact. And I'm wondering, in Germany and Europe, how the public discourse is changing, I hope, or how you can make it change and how you're trying to make it change by changing the vocabulary in the public sector.
Yeah. I'm convinced that the gender asterisk, if only on paper, does not change anything. Social perceptions need to change. Awareness has to improve. And of course, there are phrases like bitch or cat war. We all know these horrible expressions. But I would like to bring in another aspect. Often, and that has not been addressed enough today, we women ourselves are the harshest critics of us women. I think we can find a personal example easily, and I'm the oldest in this group. Back then, when I ran for the first time against a man, the chairwoman of the women's group came up to me in despair. How dare you, she said, how dare you run against this honorable man? Withdraw your candidacy. Of course, I did not withdraw my candidacy. I won. And the great thing was that this man was never offended. And I tell you something else. I come from a farm, and my mother hindered me rather than encouraged me. And when I first was elected as the rural woman, chairwoman in the country, my father said, we have to support you, girl. He said, girl, because he was proud. We want and we have to support you, he said. And my husband was no different. He said, she would support me, I know that, so I shall do the same. However, I have seen in so many times during my political career that women have been morally battered at home by their families, by their husbands, that this is the biggest obstacle to them. Whoever thinks that this is all over is dreaming. That's why I always try to encourage other women with my example and tell them not to give up.
This is so inspiring, I have to say, and so important. And you know, I always think that I hope that this discussion won't be relevant if my daughter watches this panel in a few years. When she grows up, it will be very maybe weird for her to see, to hear our voices now. I wanted to say something personal about the video that we watched from Aylam. I think it it's good to see how the media changes. I remember as a young journalist, I once reported on a woman that was killed by her husband, and the headline on our channel was it included the word romantic, and I thought to myself, there's nothing romantic about that. As a survivor of an abusive relationship, I knew that something was wrong, and I remember going to my editor saying, "This is wrong. You can't put that word when it comes to something so bad, so abusive. There's no love or romantics involved in that."
And many times in the media, they use the word attack girls or attack or pedophilia or things like that. And I constantly posted time and time again, no, she didn't attack. She raped those little girls, trying to use those wording in order to emphasize how severe are those actions as well. And I think a lot of the credit for the change in the discourse that we use also as legislator, as representatives, as leader, comes from the Me Too movement. It made such an amazing change here.
Thank you, Sharon. Ulrika?
Yes, I want to come back to the question of language. I think that it is a key issue, how we talk to one another, how the press communicates, how journalists address us, and how we talk within our parliaments. I regularly complain if the speaker says, liebe Kollegen, the male form. There are also female colleagues. It's not okay if language is chosen in such a way where women do not appear at all. That's how it begins. Then if I keep on looking, we have lots of panel discussions and talk shows on TV with guests, and I think we have seen some improvement here, but in the past there have been podiums comprised of women only, and now during the pandemic all the specialists, the experts were men. We noticed this during the first wave, and we did a lot to draw attention to it. That has changed a little, so we have to start with language and continue with visibility. I think that's very, very important, and perhaps a personal story, because Marlene told her story. When she ran for some post, I also ran against a well-deserved politician and won. It takes a lot of courage and, of course, a lot of support. But I always say jokingly, I grew up with 3 brothers, and that probably turns you more into a fighter and dealing with such issues. I want to call out to women, dear, believe in yourselves, you can do it. We have so many doubts and question ourselves as women, and if we talk about violence and difficulties, these self-doubts are even more stronger. We know it from investigations. Women look upon themselves as the guilty ones, not at the perpetrators. And it's still a long way. And we start with your daughter, with a young generation. They grow up totally differently, and they receive different education, make different experiences. And that's the way we have to go.
I want to thank you all. This was so interesting. First of all, to meet all of you strong women, Harriet included here next to me, and hear from you. It's really inspiring. I do have to say, I have so many more questions, but our time is up. And I want to thank you all again for being with us and sharing your stories with us. Hopefully next time we'll be able to hear more about maybe collaboration between countries. And I want to give Julia now the time to conclude.
Thank you, Mary. Wow. Thank you for this inspiring discussions. Thank you all very much for joining us in this event. I was very happy to see familiar faces as well, and welcome our former chairwoman of the Hans Seidel Foundation, Professor Ursula Mendle, who joined us this night. I know, Ursula, that as parliamentarian, you fought very important battles for us on this field. Thank you very much. thank you all for joining us in this event tonight. And I'm also looking forward to continuing our Israeli-German dialogue in April, where we will discuss partnership opportunities for a greener, cleaner world. And I wish you good night to everyone. And thank you all for joining us today.